Ladies and gentlemen, we owe a great deal to Claudia Hyles, as when this festival was in its infancy, when it was still the Jaipur Virasat Festival, Claudia was there holding Faith Singh's hand in its very earliest incarnation. And then the year that we started, 10 years ago, when the existing Jaipur Virasat Festival sort of split in two, and one half went off to become the Jodhpur Riff, and we stayed here in Diggy and became the what was then the DSC Jaipur Literature Festival. Claudia was living with Faith at Anoki Farm and helped work for 6 months putting that initial festival and all the work around it together. So she was here right at the infancy of this monster which has now grown up here. I think we're going to head towards 500,000 footfalls this year, which is an extraordinary thing. And so we rest on Claudia's base. Thank you. Thank you. Claudia is a woman of many talents, and I've just accused her of being a ballet dancer in her youth, which she denies.
I'm thrilled.
But we are celebrating today her literary skills and the release of a book of essays on India. She writes regularly from her base in Canberra for a variety of publications. And these essays are going to be released now. We are going to have a small ceremony of opening. So, Claudia, you have to do the Indian thing of opening the package. Do I launch it across the room too? Here's the book launch. Here we go.
Caught in slips. So what do I do with this now?
You hold it up and sort of...
There it is.
Hey. Woo, woo, woo. Okay, then you read for it and I go off the stage.
Thank you very much, Willie. I rather like the idea of the release of a book in India. At home it was launched and it felt as though it was a great big ocean liner going down the slipway and plopping into the sea. But here a release seems to have a lovely sense of flying, free as a bird, and I think I'll choose a gorgeous Indian parrot or a kingfisher with that flash of electric blue. I started writing this book really for my children and grandchildren, and a couple of the essays had started as talks, and one was an article previously published in the Australian Book Review. Actually, that was the one about the Jaipur Literature Festival. They're not at all academic. They're discursive and chatty, and so when you find a typo, don't be horrified. Just think of it as a slip of the tongue. I think that's the best way of looking at them, and just imagine that we're having a bit of a chat, you and me. The errata has been corrected in the next print run, but maybe the books that are available here today from the first will become incredibly valuable, like those stamps that are printed with a mistake. I read the other day that an American inverted Jenny stamp was sold for almost $3 million. That's one that's got an upside-down aeroplane. An editor friend told me that proofreading is an immensely important aspect of the publishing process, which she considers very underrated. Now, Queen Victoria seems to have had a huge airing at the Jaipur Festival this year, and there's a wonderful example of lack of proofreading about her when she was reported of having pissed over a bridge instead of passed. All these essays are about South Asia and the way I discovered it through my life, first in my childhood through books, and then since 1968 in almost 50 years of living and travelling here. I hope you'll find them interesting, and there are surprises even for all you Indians. For instance, you may not have connected a 19th century English bishop from Calcutta with the manufacture of cricket balls in Meerut, or the Australian colonial painter Eugene von Gerard with the 2013 Kumbh Mela, which I attended. I hope you'll find it a happy stream of consciousness and be content to swim relaxedly to the other end. I asked my daughter what she thought I ought to read to you today, and I said something about bearing my soul, to which she replied, "Oh, Mum, that's only your soul. I'm bearing my chest. You've included me naked in the bath, and here she is." Can you see it? She's 4, and her brother is bearing his all as well. He was only 5. And that was the most wonderful trip to India in 1976. It was one of the best, and my most favourite photograph is also in the book, although it's a small image. We were stopped in a train somewhere in northern Karnataka, and the children became rather fractious. We were there for ages, it seemed. So we all ran about the platform, which was quite deserted, and attracted the attention of the engine driver. And that's him in the photo, if you look in the book, with his arm around my little daughter. It's really a beautiful photo. It's wonderful to return to Jaipur in this amazing festival, and as Willie said, it certainly has changed. I was here just to observe in 2006, which was the first year that there was a literary component, and there was only one session at a time in the Durbar Hall, which seemed quite big. Then I worked as a volunteer for 6 months leading up to the 2007 festival, which again had a weekend literature component. Salman Rushdie came that year, and Willie, wherever you are, you were immersed in the White Moguls, I think, at that time. It wasn't a particularly easy time because the festival had lost vital sponsorship, so we were terribly short of funds. But it was one of the great experiences of my life, and I really have Faith Singh to thank for all of that, as well as other colleagues, some of whom I've seen over the last few days. One of the essays in my book, as I mentioned, is about the festival. It's titled A Big Tamasha, Free Speech and Sectarian Tensions at the Jaipur Festival 2012. That was the year Salman Rushdie wasn't able to come. And I've heard much about freedom of speech this year, all very interesting. Peter Stanley launched my book in Canberra. He's a military historian with a passion for India who appeared at the Jaipur Literature Festival a couple of years ago. He thinks the essay which inspires the title is the first discussion in print of the cultural, horticultural and gastronomic history of the Indian carrot. I guess Indian mothers use the same ploy as we do. Why do you have to eat up your carrots? So you can see in the dark. You can read the title in several ways, and I like the ambiguity it can imply. You can say it straight in a sort of a lilt with 2 triplets and a single stress, so you can see in the dark, and perhaps expect a description of the carrot's supposed nutritional properties. Or you could put another emphasis and make it revelatory, so you can see in the dark. It almost sounds like an investigating policeman. Or perhaps so you can see in the dark, which is encouraging. Or is it so you can see in the dark? It's affirmatory, but it also says something of relief. Oh heavens, finally, at long last, I thought you'd never get to this point. You can see in the dark. I rather like to think as well that the phrase embodies a bit of a glimpse into the unknown but incredible India. And maybe if V.S. Naipaul had eaten more carrots as a child, he may not have encountered such an area of darkness. I lived in Trinidad for 2 years, and carrots certainly do not feature there, so perhaps he was a deprived child, which might explain a great deal. I recently heard on the ABC, that's our National Broadcasting Commission, that carrots are the most frequently bought vegetable in Australia. The programme started off with some poor mother grating carrot into spaghetti bolognese, disguising it in order to get the wondrous vegetable into her children. Spag bol, what we call it, is apparently our national dish, like chicken tikka in the UK. Perhaps I'll read a bit of the book from the first essay about Indian gardens. It's titled Paradise Gardens. Then I'll read a bit from Cautionary Tales and Ripping Yarns, which is about children's literature with Indian connections. And I'm talking about Lord Curzon. He was a most superior person, brilliant, eloquent, presumptuous and self-assured. People could never be halfway in their feelings for him. He both attracted and repulsed. His viceregal term, it could almost be termed as a reign, was full of amazing events and glorious spectacle. Curzon, unsurprisingly, identified easily with the Mughal emperors. Such was his power and such the pomp and splendour. Both the Mughals and the British came from cultures obsessively interested in their gardens, seen as instruments of civilization, ordering indigenous chaos. Reprising Babur, I write a lot about Mughal gardens before this section, Curzon boasted he had turned dusty wastes into green parks and gardens. His great obsession was to preserve the architectural and archaeological heritage of India, and one of his triumphs was the Ancient Monuments Bill of 1904. The focus of his passion was the Taj Mahal. It had always been protected, but Curzon did not see himself as a mere caretaker. His imperial aspirations were to demonstrate the superiority of British civilization, its respect for the greatness of the past, and its ability to mould native peoples into loyal British subjects, beneficiaries of its enlightenment and refinement. He made changes. Everyone knows just how beautiful British gardens can be, and one of the most important features is the lawn. All over Australia at the end of summer, our lawns can look from a distance like drifts of sands. If we live in drier regions and are obedient, we don't water them when it doesn't rain, and they don't like it. Many gardeners have given up trying to maintain a green sward, turning grass into lawn with the Victor. A Victor is an iconic Australian lawnmower. Surrendering to tanbark or native grasses which need neither much water nor any mowing. But for any proper English garden, the lawn was and is the essential element, almost like the wall for the Mughals. It was the proud heart of the garden where croquet or cricket could be played, afternoon tea taken on cane chairs, or the location for a large party. Old photographs from the British Raj show sweet families on small patches of turf with hoops set up for croquet and uniformed servants steadying wobbly little children on ponies. Images of grander gatherings capture well-dressed groups watching events from comfortable seats or promenading at vice-regal parties on great sweeps of lawn. It was the primed canvas on which could be painted tall trees, flowering shrubs, and beds of annuals, varieties from homes struggling for survival alongside stronger natives. It was an oasis and an absolute necessity, even if tough local sod replaced the soft English grass which withered in the heat. When I first visited India, I saw lawnmowers being pulled by oxen in Delhi parks. Another variation had one man pulling a rope to the fore, with another guiding the mower from behind. Noisier machines are seen and heard these days. Our minuscule patch of grass in Peshawar, we lived in Peshawar for a year in Pakistan, was kept neat by the otherwise extremely lazy helper, Wakar. His first dedication was to sleep, and several times I had to scale our 10-foot-high metal gate, no mean feat, to find him dead to the world under a cooling fan, oblivious to my ringing the bell at the gate. Apart from stealing a photograph of our daughter, it wasn't the topless one, he was always well behaved and provided some amusement. He had a deep appreciation of our dining chairs, always saying, "Beautiful chairs," in his deep voice as he passed them. And he seemed to enjoy trimming the lawn with my kitchen scissors, his idea, not mine. It was a tiny garden with a slender young mulberry tree against the front wall and along one side, a bed with 3 or 4 bush roses, and a bed of 3 or 4 bush roses. The flowers were perfumed, small and cream, with a faint pink tinge, and for the 8 months we lived in the house, they bloomed without ceasing. It was a generous delight. Curzon's taste in gardens was 18th century, in the style of Capability Brown, where vast expanses of lawn, dotted with majestic trees, lapped the walls of splendid mansions. He had little interest in flowers and garden beds. He'd grown up in such a landscape at Kedleston Hall in Derbyshire, which oddly enough was the model for Government House in Calcutta, built in 1803 and occupied a century later by Curzon as Viceroy in a tenancy seemingly predestined. Both the enormous house and the garden of the original Kedleston were designed in the Palladian style by Robert Adam. The ethos was rather like a Mughal garden tomb, an integration of nature and the works of man. It is austere, rather like Capability Curzon himself. the grounds very unlike the Victorian gardens of his time, with their crowded herbaceous borders, profusion of bedding plants and topiary. Old paintings and engravings of the Taj, painted by such artists as William Dalrymple at the end of the 18th century, show the building framed in a romantic style by large spreading trees, which almost encroach upon the building. Some of the trees were said to be mahoganies. It was not Curzon's style, either personal or imperial. In deciding what the visitor might see, he exercised a similar control to Shah Jahan's design for the view his nobles might see from the garden across the river. Curzon swept away all the orchards and the shady bosky woods, those, what he called, tiresome little flower beds with their garish English flowers, and put down lawn. He micromanaged the Taj Mahal garden project and seemed particularly preoccupied with the cypresses. Where could they be planted? How densely? And could they not be larger? On a cool winter afternoon of my first visit to the Taj in 1969, there were very few visitors. A kind official invited us, 3 young foreigners, into his office in the gatehouse for a cup of chai, and displayed on the walls was an interesting collection of old photographs. They were all frontal views of the buildings, taken at every stage of cypress growth, from small and slender to tall and dense. What he did, though, he removed all the orchards from the gardens of the Taj and put down lawn, but he perhaps wouldn't be amused, just like Queen Victoria, to find pomegranate and guava orchards have come back, and I found a cluster of, well, there are lots of little English flowers, and I even found a cluster of pots near the Taj the last time I was there. Now I'll go to a little bit about Rikki Tikki Tavi. As you surely know, it's the story of a pet mongoose from Kipling's Jungle Book, and it was included in a red-covered selection of stories we had as a 6th class reader. I like mongooses, and I always feel it's a good omen to see one on a visit to India. I've seen them in the Lodi Gardens, so you certainly don't have to go into the countryside to find them. Rikki Tikki Tavi is set in a British cantonment at a place called Sagauli, once known as an area for its indigo. It's a small town in the state of Bihar, close to the border of Nepal. That was the background location given by the author, but Rikki Tikki Tavi's garden, scene of his brave deeds, is actually that of Belvedere House, a colonial bungalow in which Kipling lived as a paying guest in Allahabad in 1888. In the story, Kipling describes the large garden only half cultivated, with bushes as big as summer houses of Marshall Niel roses, lime and orange trees, clumps of bamboos and thickets of high grass. The garden he describes was a great contrast to that of his parents in Lahore, with whom he had lived while working as assistant editor on the Civil and Military Gazette. The senior Kiplings believed that trees and shrubs harboured insects which would bring dread disease to the household. They would be horrified now to see the site of the home in which they lived in Bombay when Rudyard Kipling was born. It's not the actual house, it burned down, but it's now absolutely overcome with jungle. But the Kipling compound in Lahore was completely treeless, barren and dusty, known locally as Bikaner House, after Bikaner, the princely state located in the desert. I think because we're short of time, I won't read much further about Rikki Tikki, but just to say that through reading essays by Arvind Krishna Mehrotra, I discovered that in Allahabad, the Belvedere Printing Works occupies the building in which Kipling lived. And when I went to the Kumbh Mela in 2013, I went and found the house, and the owner was at home and very kindly let us in, and it was really quite fun. I love these literary sleuthing jobs, even if they don't work out. Even with information from Ruma Godden's daughter, I found the wrong house in Narayanganj near Dhaka in Bangladesh, but it was an interesting hunt, and the wrong house was a wonderful old wreck. But I suppose by reading something about Curzon and Kipling, it might have awful overtones of colonialism and the Raj. But I am Australian after all, and we are a post-colonial nation, though we didn't have to struggle to achieve independence as India did. So I'll just finish off with a short part of the Carrot essay, which has nothing to do with colonial anywhere. The indigenous or desi carrot of India is greenish-white in colour. Did you know that? And probably originated in Afghanistan, where there was also a purple variety. These original wild species reached Greece and Rome before the Christian era, and by the 10th century, at the very latest, were found in northwestern Europe. The Moors may have brought a purple variety from North Africa to Spain soon after this, and it was the Dutch who developed the orange-coloured variety as late as the 17th century. The colour was particularly appropriate and symbolic in the Netherlands for the Royal House of Orange. Carrots were originally grown for their aromatic leaves and seeds rather than the roots, and they were related to parsley, fennel, dill and cumin. It's easy to recognise the family resemblance in the botanical cousins, and pretty Queen Anne's lace is also related. Fronds of carrot leaves were once worn as ephemeral decoration in hats. The indigenous Indian variety had little flavour in comparison to the orange European, although the 16th century Portuguese physician, naturalist and pioneer of tropical medicine, Garcia de Horta, wrote of good ones in Surat and even better in the Deccan. The desi carrot wasn't the type that British had come to know and enjoy, the improved hybrid versions having increased sweetness and minimised the woody core, so along with other vegetables they brought their own varieties. The carrots failed dismally in the plains but were grown successfully in the hills, and acclimatised seed was introduced all round the country. The carrot in the past had rather a contemptible place in Indian cookery, as well as folklore and colloquial expression. Garja mooli, which translated means carrots and radish, a metaphor for an extremely insignificant and foolish person, and is used to describe somebody with a bit of a personality bypass. Mooli, or radish, was used as a term of derision for Shah Shuja, the powerless puppet ruler placed on the Afghan throne by the British in 1839. The Chinese have always given disparaging names to foods from foreign lands. The tomato was called a barbarian eggplant, and the carrot a barbarian radish. And carrots help with seeing in the dark? A friend told me her grandmother would say after this injunction to eat them up, "Have you ever seen a rabbit wearing spectacles?" This, along with eating spinach to be as strong as Popeye, and remembering all the time the poor starving children in India who had nothing to eat at all, there were an awful lot of lectures at our dinner tables. But the huge amounts of carotene contained in carrots converts into vitamin A, which is essential for good eyesight. So I think we're out of time and dead on time. So thank you very much for coming.